Hello everybody, thank you for joining us today. My name is Michael Weir. I'm your friendly neighborhood technical marketing engineer for cybersecurity here at Ingram Micro. Today we are continuing our Cybersecurity 101 series to talk about firewalling. This being part one of a few on firewalls because they're sort of central to network security. If you've watched any of the previous videos in this series, this agenda will look very familiar to you. First, we're going to talk about what is a firewall. Second, we're going to talk about how do firewalls work. And then third, we're going to review. So, what is a firewall? To talk about a firewall, I just want to review what networking is according to our previous videos. Networking is sending information from one device to another, one thing to another, whether it be talking, whether it be the internet, whether it be whatever. And what we've been talking about is sending an email from you to your coworker across the internet. This has been our definition and our example we're using for networking. Thinking back to our last video now, we have to review a little bit. To get things from you to the internet to the person on the other side, we're using something called a router. And that router just decides which traffic is going to go where, next hop, etc., etc. Now, the problem with a router is it does that indiscriminately to any traffic that goes through, including malicious traffic that we wouldn't want going through there. So what a firewall does is it sits between you and the internet, and it says, okay, we're going to let the good traffic through, but we're going to block the malicious traffic. Now I know, once again, like I've said in all these, that's kind of an oversimplification. There's a lot more going on there. Some people are watching this rolling their eyes or something like that right now, but remember, this is a 101 course. If you want more details, we'll have to have a more complicated video for you. So how does the firewall do that? How does it stop that bad traffic? Well, let's talk about the basics of it. So this is talking about traffic coming from the internet to your device. And there's good traffic and bad traffic. The good traffic, it says yes. To the bad traffic, it says no. Now, how does it say no? No, in a basic firewall, is two things. It's access control lists and it's stateful packet inspection. Now, an access control list is just a list that says we will either accept things from these locations and not from any other location, or more commonly, we will accept things from all locations except fill in the blank. So that's blocking specified traffic like that. And there's also this thing called stateful packet inspection. Stateful packet inspection is saying that everything that comes in has to be a response to something that went out. Nothing can go into the network that isn't a response to something that went out to the internet. So like a web page or something can't automatically send itself to your computer. Your computer has to make a request for those resources, and the firewall says, okay, this is an answer to this host's request, so we're going to let it through. That is basic firewalling. After basic firewalling, there's something called next generation firewalling. Next generation firewalling adds a layer onto the know of application control. So application control is saying what applications can go when, where, and how on the network. So it's not just looking at packet or address level. We're now looking at the application layer. If you remember from my first video there where we talked about the OSI model, this is to the application layer. So after that comes a UTM, or Unified Threat Management Firewall. This is the generation that things are on right now, despite the fact that the next generation firewall is called next generation. UTM firewall adds more complicated services. It adds something called intrusion prevention. Intrusion prevention is a service that looks at packets coming through and say, do any of these contain known exploits, whether it be on a single packet or across a number of packets. And if it sees something that's a known exploit, it blocks those packets from going through. There's also Gateway Antivirus, which says, okay, the sum of all these packets coming through, whether it be a file or something concrete along those lines, does it, when put together, constitute a known virus that matches a signature, or in some cases something that needs to be sandboxed to see if it's a zero-day attack or not. And if it sees that something is malicious, it blocks it and doesn't let it go through, or in some cases just notifies the network, hey, this host needs to be quarantined, this file needs to be quarantined, etc., etc. If you caught a theme between those two, it's that we're now looking across multiple packets. We're not paying attention to address, we're not just paying attention to application, we're looking across multiple packets for a pattern that could be blocked or needs to be blocked. There's also another one called web filtering. Web filtering has an effect of saying there's a no in the other direction too. You can't go to these websites. And I say sort of because what it's really doing is saying these websites can't answer you. But you can think of it like this, that web filtering is another thing on the UTM firewall saying we can't go to these addresses. But what makes it different than an ACL, because, well, actually it's rooted as an ACL, is the fact that it's looking at things like DNS resolution and domain names. It's not just looking at addresses. Right, because there's some things, DDNS is going to have more than one address for the same domain, that sort of thing. Anyway, that's a good summary of how a firewall works in terms of the services on them that make them a firewall. So a quick review just to make sure we're all on the same page. First of all, firewalls control traffic across a network, or I should say, I suppose I could say from the internet to a network. Basic firewalls do that with something called access control lists and stateful packet inspection. An access control list is a list of who can go where, typically blacklisting, sometimes whitelisting. And SPI stateful packet inspection says everything coming in has to be an answer to something that went out. Nothing can come in unless something inside requested it to come in. Next generation firewall, it's application control. So that application control is saying which applications can cross the firewall with some elements of when or how. And then a UTM firewall functions with the services of intrusion prevention, gateway antivirus, and web filtering on top. Intrusion prevention blocks known exploits regardless of their source, so it's not static. Gateway antivirus blocks malicious content spread out over multiple packets, and web filtering says, hey, these sites cannot respond to a request even when requested. So that's the basics of the services on a firewall and how they work very, very quickly. If you need more information, here's my email. I'm the presenter, Michael Weir at IngramMicro.com. You can see a list of all our vendors, including which ones are firewall vendors here at Ingram Micro at SecurityLineCard.com. If you just want additional information about cybersecurity in general, you can go to the Ingram Micro's Imagine Next site for cybersecurity listed there. On general questions, cybersecurity at IngramMicro.com. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and realize the promise of technology.